Hi, everyone. It's the Catholic CEO, Henry Katarna. This is our Exemplary Catholic Leaders series, and I'm really happy today to have with us Mario Kranjac. He's a very interesting guy, and we're getting to know each other a little bit in the past few days. And so I'm really happy, Mario, that you're with us today. How's it going today?
Good afternoon, Henry, and thank you for having me on your show. Appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Let's begin maybe if you could tell us, we want to find out about your Catholic faith journey and so on. How about at the beginning here, mention who you are and what you're doing. What's your line of work these days, your profession? I think people would be interested to hear that.
Okay, well, appreciate the question because it's actually an interesting answer. I've got three answers for you. I am a full-time attorney here in New York City. I practice transactional business law, a lot of venture capital work, mergers and acquisitions, and private equity work. And my other job is being a general partner in the venture capital fund that focuses on life sciences, tools, and technology. So these are enabling technologies in the life sciences industry. And then my third job, which is an elected position, but a non-paying volunteer position, is the mayor of Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, which is directly across the Hudson River from northern Manhattan. And there are actual cliffs in Englewood Cliffs, and I hope you get to visit us there someday, Henry.
I hope to be able to do that. And I know that Englewood Cliffs is a familiar name to us, I think because of publishing industry in the past. It seemed to be there were always publishers there.
So that's right. There was a large corporate campus for a large publisher, which has now been turned into a magnificent campus for LG Electronics North America. And close by is Unilever's headquarters in North America, and also CNBC and Ferrari North America. So we have some very great brands there.
That's great. No, and I'm a sports car guy, so I appreciate you mentioning Ferrari. Although Jaguar happens to be my favorite sports car, but we'll let that one pass by.
Very stylish, Henry.
Yeah, exactly.
Jaguars as well, especially the old E-types.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful car. So I'm really happy to hear that you are a mayor, and we'll talk about that in a few seconds here. I also wanted to mention that you're a VC guy, and I'm an angel investor. I run an angel investor group today, and I ran one for 12 years that had 150 investors. So I'm really interested to hear more about that, Mario, because in the Catholic CEO, we are really focusing on the constituent elements of a Catholic economy. So that's another topic that I'd like to cover with you as well. And so you're a practicing attorney as well. So this is great, and I wanted to thank you for mentioning all of that. We're going to dig into each of those and in fact, we should do that now before we talk about your faith journey. What's it like to be a Catholic attorney in New York City these days? What's top of mind? What happens? What are your clients telling you? What do you see out there?
Well, everyone knows what my faith is, and I know theirs to the point where they do practice their faith. And I've had some wonderful relationships with people from other religions, and I've been to their religious ceremonies. And I think that's one of the great things about people of faith is that we can all share each other's and find similarities and likeness, and especially in the faiths that come out of Abraham. We all have a common denominator there. There are Catholic lawyer groups here in New York, which are very active, and especially enjoy going to those events and speeches.
Are they, the Catholic lawyers, would they be a networking group, or would that be more like, is there anything that they do, for example, towards public policy or legislation or things like that in a formal way?
Yes, they get involved. Of course, there's some networking involved, but of course, there's actually a serious policy component to it as well. And I practice law with the mindset of do unto others as you wish to have done to you, and don't do unto others as you don't want done to you also. So we got the golden rule and the silver rule, and it's been a good compass for life in general. And St. Luke hit it right when he created it. So
yeah, this is so important. And again, with the Catholic economy concept that we are working on, this is the whole point, is that Catholics can do business as Catholics, but also in a Catholic way, so that we could, bring in the Catholic principles of ethics and morality into all of our work. And so it's interesting to hear that you are doing that. And does that group align itself with, let's say, others across the country? Is it a regional group, New York only, or is it a part of a national body? I'm just interested, curious.
There's a couple of different groups. Some are, one is more local and one is more national. The Catholic economy is an important component to all our lives, of course, because that's what we are, that's what we practice. I'm completely agnostic when it comes to who my clients are, as long as they're people with values.
Yes.
That's the difficult thing sometimes here in New York, or anywhere for that matter, is to find people that you relate with in the sense of values and want to represent them. So it's quite often the case where I'll tell somebody that I don't think I'm the right lawyer for them based on what they want to do or not do. And that there's plenty of attorneys here in New York and in the United States, North America, that probably will help them. So.
Sure. No, understood. And that is, this is an interesting concept too, in the Catholic CEO and in all of my consulting work over my lifetime. I've always worked with people of all different persuasions, and we continue to do so. Even in the Catholic CEO, there are some very good friends of ours who are interested in what we do because it's principle-based approach. And yes, those who are Catholic do appreciate that very much, of course, but so do others who practice different mindsets and different persuasions. They appreciate a principle-based approach. So I can understand how you might want to select clients, and sometimes you might want to decline taking a client. I have done that in the past too, where sometimes you don't take a client on because the fit isn't there, and it could be for many, many reasons, but it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Let's turn a little bit to the VC, the venture capital world. I'm very interested in that. And you spoke about life sciences technology. What type of technologies would that be, Mario?
So these are enabling technologies. So think of the picks and shovels of the gold rush. It's not the actual gold, but it's the tools to get to the gold. So these are technologies that enable better outcomes in patient care and therapies. And the therapies will use these technologies. So for example, if you're growing out cells for some kind of therapy and you need to separate cells in a fluid, you could touch those cells with a filter and filter out the cells that you want, in which case you'll end up damaging cells and having a smaller yield. Or you could use one of the technologies that we invested into, which is a sound wave technology, which will separate cells using a sound wave, much akin to the noise cancellation technology that you find in jet engine noise suppression or even headphones that people wear. You can actually manipulate a solid and a fluid using a different sound wave to capture the size of cells that you'd like to have, and actually your yield will be much higher because you're not physically touching the cells with a filter. So that's a real good example of the technologies that we are out looking for and that we invest in.
This is very interesting. In the Catholic CEO world, we have some of our close associates increasingly coming to us are venture capital people. In fact, we just met a fellow from California a couple of weeks ago, and so it's very interesting that the Catholic world, we can work in these fields and enable technologies to do really good. It's a social good, and it's also for the common good. And it can be somewhat controversial, I suppose, if it's an area. But I think you would this be right in the Catholic perspective on this? You would be avoiding investing in technologies that might be straying far from.
That's right. That's right. But Henry, you also have to understand that any good technology could always be used for bad and for evil. And we've seen it since the invention of the wheel, I guess. We try to make sure that what we're investing in is going to be used for good. And as I said, we don't actually, as a fund, fund the actual therapies or the treatments. We fund the tools and technologies that are used by others. So if you created the internet, people have used the internet for good things and for bad things, as we know. And,
yeah, it's such an important thing you've said, working on the tools and, you know, things and situations people can be misused. But it's a noble pursuit in the sense of you're trying always to improve our approaches. And as an angel investor, I also have come across these kinds of issues where there are so many fantastic technologies really that are helpful, and as long as they're put to the proper use, then we're okay.
That's
so
right.
Very interesting. I'd like to turn to the political world. I have some familiarity with municipal politics, and not in any direct way, but I did a stint in government once. I was once a deputy minister of economic development in a Canadian province, as well as I was a deputy minister of social services. And so I really have an appreciation for public policy. And so how did you, what caused you to run for mayor of Englewood Cliffs?
So I'll answer the question simply as it was a dare, but then I'll explain because it was a dare actually. So my family came to America from what was former Yugoslavia and is now where they were from is now Croatia. And at the time my parents came here, Yugoslavia was a communist country. You didn't have the right to pursue any kind of capitalist pursuit, but more importantly, you didn't have the freedom of religion. You could worship, but then you couldn't advance in society or in the economy. So it was a kind of like communism light, but it was still communism, and there was a flood of people leaving there. And fortunately for me, my parents came to America. We ended up in the New York metropolitan area. And I've always had a great appreciation and fondness and love of America and its values. And just without any hesitation, I think it's really been a blessing to me and to my family that we are here. We were able to prosper. We were able to educate ourselves. And, you know, even in Europe these days, you could go out and get a great education, but there is still a glass ceiling. The aristocracy is still very strong in terms of limiting people. And I think, you know, when you think of America and Canada to a great degree either, because I know you're up there, the opportunities are limitless to flourish as a human being. And the religious freedom is certainly a part of that. The economic system is part of that, and the democracies are a part of that as well. So in my town, where we live, and my wife and I raised 3 children there, we had a father and son mayor for 42 years. And so it was looking a lot like the place that my parents left, where you would have a dictatorial, communist, or a feudal kind of system. And I just found it amazing that I was living in a town where there was a father and son mayor for 42 years. And, you know, there's a lot of wealth generated for themselves and for their cronies. And I decided on a dare, when somebody heard me complaining, that I should run for mayor. And I won, even though I'm in the party that is not a majority. I'm a Republican elected official, and I was actually reelected. And what I did was, though, because I wanted to make sure that future generations look at this as a good experiment, which is that I would self-impose a 2-term limit so that I would not become like the people that I replaced. And I was hoping, actually, this is a little bit of a disappointment. I was hoping it would gain traction throughout New Jersey, that more people would self-impose term limits, but I think that's a hard thing for politicians to do. And I'm not a career politician, and I never will be. I've got other jobs, as I mentioned, but others don't have other jobs, and this is their job. So I think it's important, though, for people to get involved in the United States and in Canada in their civic duties and do as you did, Henry, which is commendable. Have positions in the government, and you clearly did it and moved on, and somebody else is doing it now. So I think it's always good to have new ideas come in. I'm in the second year of my second term. I have 2 more years, and I'm hoping that somebody else will come in with new ideas.
It's a great, I love your approach. You know, Mario, my Polish grandparents, Polish on both sides, came from Poland, and 2 brothers came. One came to New Jersey, Passaic, New Jersey, actually.
I was born in Passaic.
No kidding. There you go. My grandfather's brother came to Passaic, and then my grandfather came to Canada, so he got off the boat in Halifax.
Oh.
The other one got off the boat in New York, and my grandfather in Canada rode the rails, took the train to Regina, Saskatchewan, started to work on the railway, worked at a railway hotel, one of those classic old railway hotels that's still there, a beautiful edifice, and then started a business and gradually worked his way up. And so what you've mentioned at the beginning about your family coming to America for the values and the freedom and all of that, it really resonates with me and my family as well. And what also resonates is what you just said about the political structure. If you've got that sort of divine right of kings approach where a generation of father and son takes on politics, and you know, we don't need to get into that in great detail except to say that that's not a healthy approach. And I remember one time when I'm an economist by training. I studied, you know, we learned a lot about Tammany Hall politics in the area. And so that was one of my first, as a high school student, one of my first introductions to how these things work. And of course, we see it all across the board nowadays in many countries. So I commend you for that. And that's what happens as the mayor, again, on Catholic issues? Is there any direct, pressure on you to do things that are against the faith? I guess that may be an extreme example, but what about that whole part of it, Paul?
So that's an interesting component. I often start meetings saying how fortunate and blessed we are, if you believe in God, that we live where we live in a time when we do live. And I try to cover all the bases with statements like that. We're fortunate or we're blessed, and you could be both also. But I try to actually be very accommodating to everyone, but don't push me against my faith, because then you're going to get the reaction that I think as a good Catholic you should get from me. And I always tell people that you may not like what I say or what I do, but I am consistent about it, and I am consistently taking the position of what my religion would require me to do or not do. And you have a lot of pretenders. People come in with different issues, and they try to basically put you up against the wall or in a corner based on your beliefs, your politics, or your religion. And there's always a good answer if you're consistent. It's only if you're not consistent then you run out of those answers. And I think more importantly than any of the 3 positions I mentioned that I have, lawyer, venture capitalist, or mayor, is being a parent. I think that is probably the most important position, and it's not a job, so I didn't list it as a job, or a good husband, I didn't list that as a job either. But if you have children in such a blessed and fortunate environment, how do you actually keep your children motivated with the moral and Catholic teachings that we want them to have, and prosper, but still participate to the fullest, right? And thankfully, for my wife of 30 years this year, and I have been able to accomplish that. We're very proud of our children. I'm very proud of my wife, Nancy, for being able to do all that. Nancy was a credit analyst at a major bank, and She's done a fabulous job raising our three children, who are in their early, mid, and late 20s at this point. And we're looking for our first wedding in a month. And that'll be celebrated at St. Ignatius Loyola on Park Avenue.
Excellent. That's may God bless you and your whole family and your wife and the children. It's really it's interesting that you mentioned that at this point, because children, we know this, look to their parents, they look to their father. For example, you are in these three different roles that you play, and the children will look for consistency too as a parent, won't they? They'll see us if we're consistent or inconsistent in everything that we do. And so I imagine you might have had some interesting conversations with your children about these three roles you play. Have you dinner table conversations, perhaps?
We have had those conversations. Sometimes there's controversial issues in town that I always tried to shield my children from if I had to deal with them. But they've been great. We've had great discourse. Two of them have gone on to become attorneys at major firms here in New York, and one of them the youngest is in grad school right now in Washington. So it's a joy and a blessing to see them whenever we're able to. My wife is Italian born, so they're always coming around for a meal whenever they can, which is great. It keeps them close.
I just can imagine that, and it is fantastic to keep them close. I know that the children can look to their father and their mother for exemplary principles and behaviors, and it's just so important to continue doing this. And so, like I say, may God bless you and your entire progeny that will come in due course.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Welcome.
That's very kind of you.
What comes to mind then is, you're obviously in these three roles that you've spoken about. You're driven by a set of principles, and that is the Catholic faith. And I can see that you're acting in accord with your Catholic faith, and you try to do that in each of these three things. Tell us about your Catholic faith journey. Were you always Catholic? And when you came to the U.S., did you practice your faith? And tell us about that.
So that was such an important part of my life growing up, and to this day it is. So I was born here. I was born in Passaic, as I mentioned to you earlier, where your uncle was. But my parents attended Mass every Sunday, and my two sisters and I would always accompany them. And we went to, I went to Catholic grammar school, high school, Jesuit university, and Jesuit law school. So it's been straight through for me. And for me, it's been such a great part of my life. I mean, I grew up as an altar boy, and we did a lot of church activities, but we also I did a lot of sports, and we always found time for going to Mass. And to this day, my family, my immediate family, and I do. My children still do. I became invested in the Knights of Malta back in 2001. And that's been a great addition to the faith journey. The Knights of Malta are the oldest chivalrous order and philanthropic order in the Catholic Church. And once a year, there's a trip to Lourdes sponsored by the Knights of Malta worldwide. And my wife and I have gone there, and you'll accompany a malad, somebody who needs a caregiver, or there's usually healthcare givers, which I'm not one of, but I am very good at pulling a voiture or a wheelchair for whoever needs to.
Very good.
So we look forward to resuming that again with the post-pandemic world that I'm hoping that we're entering into right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a hope. I'm really pleased to hear about the Knights of Malta, and I certainly in past years, 3 or 4 years now, I've been a member of the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem, which is, I'm not going to say it's a sister organization to Knights of Malta, because Knights of Malta has I think a long history as well. But the thing about these organizations that I have found, and I presume you do, it's works of mercy and charity that are really at the root of it all. And so I'm excited to hear about your possible resumption of the trips, because that's such an important thing.
So they do wonderful things, and they donate to great organizations, food pantries and others throughout the United States. One of the trips that my wife and I went on for our 25th anniversary, I had asked her, so where do you want to go for our 25th anniversary? And that was 5 years ago. So if you want to go to Paris, want to go to Rome, where would you like to go? And then she's like, I'll think about it. And I came home one night and I said, hey, you know what? The Knights of Malta are having a Salvation History tour to the Holy Land, because that's where I want to go. So Nancy and I went there with a tour that was led by the Knights of Malta. And it's like connecting the Catholic dots through the Bible when you go through on a Salvation History tour. And it's great to experience it. I wish everyone would have an opportunity to do that. And it was a wonderful week that we had tracing Jesus' steps through the Holy Land.
Yeah, it's amazing how that brings home the roots of our faith, the beginning of it, and it just brings it to mind when you have physically been to these places. So I can imagine that it must have deepened your faith. Yeah, is that right?
It certainly did. And one of the other things that we tried to do as parents is whenever we were on vacation, no matter where in the world we were with our children, we would take them to Mass on Sunday. And that way you could actually experience Catholic Mass in a different cultural setting. And, sometimes it was, we have to get the kids off the beach and go to Mass. And there's some pushback sometimes. And sometimes it just became kind of comical. Like, we would show up and all of a sudden, the local clergy and the ushers at the Mass would ask us to bring up the gifts, which we were honored to do, of course, but because we were the visitors, and I guess even though it's a vacation area, they're not used to seeing a lot of vacationers go to Mass. So that was always kind of fun, because you never knew what to expect, and the kids always enjoyed that when we were growing up. I remember also a couple of years back, I was in China with Newt Gingrich, who was the former Speaker of the House of Representatives here in the United States, and Newt had just converted to Catholicism, and I think it was like 2009 or 2010, and we were in Beijing, and we decided we're going to go to Sunday Mass, and Newt's wife Callista joined us as well, and we went to the Cathedral Matteo Ricci, and we walk in, and Newt goes straight to the front pew, and I said, Newt, maybe we should just sit in the back a bit, because there's local customs, and it's nice to follow the older people in front of us in terms of what they do and when they do it. And the local ushers were insistent that we sit in the front, so it was a great experience, of course. And
that's great. I love these kind of stories, because they tell us, first of all, there's a certain transcendence to what you just said. The faith is universal. You can go anywhere in the world and you can participate. And when you do so, it's particularly on business trips, it's an example. It's exemplary. And I've done a similar thing in different countries that I've traveled to, and at the same time, I recall very interesting your comment about vacation trips. Same thing. We'd be in a campground someplace, and we'd go to Mass in some rustic outdoor setting sometimes, or in some sort of a small chapel out in the bush, and it's just it's an edifying experience. And then we go back home and go to regular Sunday Mass at the cathedral parish, which is a very different kind of structure.
Right, exactly. But it's universal, and you really struck a chord when you said that. Just hope and pray that.
Mario, when you are part of these three, let's call them focuses of your life that you're currently involved in, I'd like to come back to this topic of the pressure on the faith. The culture seems to be a woke culture. There seems to be increasing pressure on us to do things that are inimical to the Catholic faith. And do you find that are you able to meet that challenge? Can you resist it? How does it work in those areas that you're currently working in?
great question, and I'm kind of smiling because there's not a day that goes by where someone's not trying to cancel me for one reason or another. And I think the whole culture goes back to basically separating people from God, separating husbands from wives, separating parents from children, and we just go through. We just keep escalating and escalating and escalating, and it's a pendulum that has swung so far to the left. It seems like it's starting to swing back. So there is hope, and not every social problem is everyone's fault, right? It's not my fault.
Yes.
It's not everyone's fault. We're certainly here to help and to try to fix things if we can. But a lot of times those are problems that other people created. The lack of parents being around for their children, schools pushing philosophies that are inconsistent with family values. When I went to school, it was learn English, learn how to write, do math, science, and history, right? And now it's gone from there to the government is actually trying to replace parents. And
yes.
There's been significant pushback on that. You saw it in Virginia recently in the governor election there. And the one good thing that came out of COVID is that parents were actually able to see what was being taught to their children. And that's created a firestorm because, you cannot separate parents from children. And so I think the pendulum is swinging back.
I'm interested in this pendulum swing too, and I can mention a couple of areas that I see it happening as well, Mario. One is certainly if I look at my own family, my extended family, there's a trend, homeschooling. It's going on quite significantly, or private Catholic schools that teach the classical curriculum. There is where we can defend the faith and not even allow those influences of the culture to creep into the education system. At least we can protect our children that much, and in my case, my grandchildren, we can protect them that much.
Right, and children will mature and they'll learn about different things at the right time in their lives. But if you have a kindergartner being taught things that they can't possibly comprehend, what's the point of it? It just seems to make progressive teachers feel better about themselves to be able to do this for whatever reason. They may be frustrated in their own lives, and they feel they need to impart lies to 5-year-olds. And I think Governor DeSantis had a lot to say about that recently, along with the Florida legislature, and signed a law into effect, basically saying, this is the purview of parents. If parents want to speak to their children about such subjects, they are free to do that, but the government shouldn't be doing it.
Absolutely. What's happened is you've given some excellent examples where people have stood up for truth, the truth. I'm talking about the objective truth. And it's admirable that people are doing this. And so many Catholic commentators these days, you've heard these too, they're saying, Catholics take up space, like get on your school boards, get on your local municipal boards and so on, and stand up and fight for the truth of principles and protect our children, protect our coming generations from policies and viewpoints that a particular group in society has been very successful in infiltrating, really, in the last 30, 40, 50 years, I'd say.
Yeah.
So, it takes guts to do this, because you have to stand up and be public about it in some way. And I imagine you in your political life, as you said a few minutes ago, it's there, that constant pressure is there, but you're being, once in a while you said people are pushing you into a corner, they're trying to cancel you or trying to get you focused on a particular hot button issue.
Yeah, so a lot of times, on the good side, people come up to me and privately, because a lot of people don't want attention drawn to them. They're not going to speak publicly about it, but privately will keep encouraging me and thanking me, and thank you for keeping some of the curriculum out of the school, or at least making it known that you don't want it in the school. And I really appreciate that. You're on the right track when you're getting so many of those people. And, haters are going to hate, so they're always going to write things, and I don't really care. And I don't read it anyway. So not that they'll be watching your show, but
but you have to have you have to be a bit Teflon, don't you? You have to be able to let this all wash off of you, because if you internalized all of these pressures, it's a problem. In recent weeks, even with our, it's coming back to the Catholic CEO work, we're a business as well as an apostolate. But this focus of ours, this recent project, the Catholic economy, I'm very humbled to see what's happening. Like even in the last few days, we've got an event coming up. In the last few days, I've seen I think it's over 100 people just in the last few days, really since Friday, sign up for the Catholic Economy Project because they're concerned. They're living Catholic lives. They're in all sorts of professions and fields, and they're trying to make sense of it. And they're trying to now band together. So what would you say about that, Mario? Like, how can Catholics band together, not only in the practice of our faith, but to face these issues that you're speaking about and that you actually face on a regular basis?
So I that's a great question. Look, the mass media is entirely anti-Catholic.
Yes. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And they will purvey a zeitgeist of anti-Catholic thought, anti-values, and it's just it becomes a counterculture movement, whereas culture leads politics, and politicians, for whatever reason, are incapable of being consistent and keeping to their own values for the most part. Some do. And so if they see the culture separating parents from children, separating God from families, that's what they grasp onto, and they become purveyors of that too at the legislative level. So, Catholics should realize that you're not going to get an honest news report from mass media. That's not what they've changed, right? They're no longer journalists. They're just lobbyists at this point. I call them former newspapers when they show up to my meetings.
I love it.
And you kind of get under their skin, and it's good, because then they want, for whatever reason, the media wants to become part of the story now. They don't want to report on other people's stories. They want to be the story. And any network or any newspaper that's doing that is no longer in media. It's more of a lobbyist. So I would just encourage good Catholics to stay the course, band together. And then this day and age, of course, it's very easy to band together until Twitter or somebody else cancels you off the platform, or deplatforms you, or demonetizes you if you're trying to create an alternate news source for people. But I think in the end, the level-headed, righteous, value-driven people are going to prevail, and the pendulum will swing back. Now, my concern is that it swings back too far the other way also. So because that's what tends to happen, right? And we don't want that either. We want to have open discourse, people being able to share their ideas, and people able to disagree with each other. We've here in the United States, we have surrendered our universities to this type of culture, and you cannot have. It recently happened, I think, at Yale Law School. They had a freedom of speech seminar that was anything but. The conservative speaker was drowned out, right? So, what does that accomplish? And these are the future lawyers of America.
Yeah, exactly. And you have followed, I'm sure, Jordan Peterson, Canadian professor, who he was about to be canceled for improper use of a particular pronoun.
Right, the pronouns got him in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting what you say, and And we have surrendered. Canadian universities would be no different. U.S. university. I have family in Texas and in Chicago, actually, and certainly relatives in the generations from my grandfather's brother in New Jersey. They're all commenting that we've surrendered. It's dangerous to send your children to a public indoctrination facility like that, and so there's a movement again for why should we send people to university? Why shouldn't we just have careers and professions and so on in a non-university training atmosphere? So that's one solution that some people espouse, and I'm sure there's others. What would you say then, Mario, for what advice would you give Catholic families today, raising children, trying to get into business, doing business? You've lived in these three areas that you're working with. It's really investment, finance, it's the practice of law, and it's certainly the municipal politics, public policy. What would you say to Catholic families, the ordinary family trying to raise kids these days?
I'll give you a two-part answer. The first part is, as it relates to your children, never compromise on your values, and also make sure you pay very close attention to your children's classmates and friends and what their parents are doing at their home. We've always been the playhouse. Kids in the neighborhood always came to our house. We didn't indoctrinate, we didn't do anything. We just want to create a nice environment for children to be children. That's it.
Excellent.
Simple as that. And then, we took our children to mass and exposed them to church, to mass, to all the great things that come out of that, to all the great sermons that our children have heard.
Yes.
A lot of times they're not so great, or they're going over the children's heads, but often enough the children will pick up something from a sermon. And the other thing I really struggle with is that I'm an elected official. I volunteer my time.
Mm-hmm.
I ran for office, but the larger institutions, and I'm more entrepreneurial, so I self-fund and I employ myself, and people aren't allowed to participate in their governments because they're working for large companies, large banks. It will be a stain on their record, if at all, even if they're able to survive it. And I think that's really going away from what America and Canada also were founded upon. It's the fact that people should be able to step away from their jobs or juggle their jobs and render some civic duty, service to their fellow citizens, and then step back in and be able to have beliefs that maybe aren't as popular as the mass media would want them to have, but not sacrifice their careers. Here, it's become impossible. You cannot do that here without sacrificing your career. Yeah. And I see it. I'm told, well, somebody didn't invest in our fund because of who you are. Okay, but other people did invest because of who I am, and that should be enough, And yeah. I'm sure they're free to go find another fund to invest in, and I'm free to have somebody else invest in their spot. But there's all these tensions that have been created unnecessarily because there's no tolerance.
Yeah. So our latest example of that is in January, we held an event, a summit. We had 150 Catholics participating all across the US and Canada, online summit. And it was for people who have lost their jobs for conscience reasons in recent times. You know what I'm talking about. And so we found that one of the categories of that group of people, that many people are looking to start their own business as a way to gain independence, because either they've lost their job currently in a large corporate setting, or they're about to lose their job, or they'll increasingly, never mind the job on that current situation of the last 2 years, but it's also possible that in the future they'll be asked to do things that are completely inimical to the Catholic faith. And so now they're looking to start a business to create some independence. What do you think of that trend? We've seen that, and I'll just throw you one more example. In my own parish, 35 people have lost their jobs for conscience reasons. And so I'm working with some of them on a pro bono basis to help them start a business. And so I've got about 8 or 10, actually 10 people now that are of that group wanting to start a business. Do you think that that's a path to independence from the culture, or at least for a time?
Yeah, so it's a great reaction of self-preservation.
Yeah.
To do that, you shouldn't have to do that if you didn't
Sure.
intend to or want to. But I think it's a great path. Happy to help anyone who needs guidance in that regard here in the United States. I did it for a combination of reasons. I was always entrepreneurial and wanted to practice what I preach to my clients, who are a lot of entrepreneurs themselves. So I created my own law firm and then a fund, of course. But I think it's a great reaction. And the problem becomes when those companies become very big, the government starts creating requirements on those types of companies, and
Yes.
It'll come to a head again, and hopefully those newly found entrepreneurs will be in a better position to tell the government yes or no without intimidation.
Yeah, exactly.
Because what we have in terms of government, I've realized this, is that we've heard of the deep state and how the administrative state is actually running everything, no matter who the elected officials are. The administrative state knows that the elected official is eventually going to retire, resign, get unelected, right? They're going to outlast anyone who is running for political office, and without regard to what the requirements are and who has the authority and the power, the administrative state will block, frustrate, delay, lag behind, do everything possible to get a proper agenda exercised. And I've seen it locally as well. I call it, instead of the deep state, I call it the deep borough, deep city. I come in after 42 years. Well, everybody who works for this government has been appointed by my predecessors. It took a long time to actually show people that, hey, I just want you to come to work and do your job. I don't want any favors for myself or for my friends or for my family. I'm giving you freedom. And now people realize that, and I won't get too specific, but people realize that, wow, I was right. You now have the freedom to come to work unimpeded, to do your job, go home and enjoy your family without putting your liberty or job on the line because you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing for elected officials. And, it's there's a lot being written about the administrative state, and it needs to be pushed back upon.
Yeah. And Mario, I in the provincial government that I worked as a senior, I was in the bureaucracy. So a deputy minister is the top public servant. I guess I'm not sure what the equivalent would be in the U.S. State system, but I was not an elected politician, but I was the senior guy. And so in social services, massive operation, economic development, a smaller operation, but still massive in terms of its need to generate wealth, which could then be redistributed by the social services system. There's a little bit of a cycle there, but I discovered also what you've said about the bureaucracy. I came in, I was there a short time. I wasn't there a long time, but I noticed that had I stayed, it would have, it's one of the reasons I left, but had I stayed, I would have been pressured, I think, and I would have probably been perhaps even sucked in a little bit into this kind of an approach. And so I'm glad I didn't do it, but I'm glad I did a stint in the public sector. It's problematic. And, like you say, in your world, we don't need to get into details, but certainly you will have experienced this. And when you move on from your self-imposed term limit, we'll see what happens, I suppose one could say. Will there be someone like you, or will there be a return to a different system? That could be a problem.
You know what? I think we're well positioned that the citizens of my town realize what honest, uncorruptible government looks like. While we're not perfect in our results in terms of getting things done, I would say 90% of the time it's because wherever we're not succeeding is because the state laws require us to fail rather than succeed and do what's best for taxpayers, right? So I did, have the first tax cut after 42 years in my town, and I had another one last year. So I think once people realize what good government looks like, and you try to inform them as much as possible about their relationship with the government and what the government's doing, that I think they'll make better decisions in the future when they vote for people. And I'm hoping that there'll be good candidates to vote for. That's the challenge, right? Getting people to actually step up and do this, and get attacked, as you said.
Sure. Yeah, you do get attacked. It's really what you're exhibiting here in your principle-based approach to, let's say, local politics. It's really you're exhibiting a principle-based approach, but you're actually exhibiting Catholic virtue. Virtue is in the mean, as we have always been taught. It's not at either extreme. It's civil. It's in the middle. It's balanced. And if you can bring that as a modicum of normality to a local area, it's exemplary. And that's interesting, because who's doing that these days would be a question I would ask. And I presume there are more Marios out there, but it's an interesting question to see if can we create another generation of politicians that have this approach?
Yeah, let's try to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm going to ask you one more question about the Catholic faith journey, and I wonder if you could go back, Mario, in your lifetime, and point to maybe one or two kind of key dramatic or watershed moments in your Catholic faith, either with respect to yourself, your work, or in the wider community. Just what strikes you in your life as top key dramatic moments in the Catholic faith?
So I'd go back to 8th grade grammar school graduation, and when I started grammar school, I did not speak English. My parents had just, they were newly new to America, so to go from being very average to valedictorian, and just embracing everything that came out of a Catholic school, they did nurture children tremendously. When I was at Catholic school, and I know when my children were there as well, and so I think that's a great light bulb faith moment to see all that come together. And then I would say the second would be my wedding mass. I mean, it was tremendous.
Yeah, there's nothing like a beautiful nuptial mass that edifies and portrays the dignity of faith and support for the family and the dignity of marriage and all of that. The family being the fundamental unit of society. Now I'm going off on a tangent here about that, but that's very interesting.
Yeah. So
yeah. So we could talk for a long time. We're coming to a natural close to our conversation today. I was going to ask you, tell us where we can find you in each of these three areas, if you want to promote them a little bit, and tell us where we can find you, and where people who are interested in investing or following your legal work, or even learning about public policy.
I appreciate that opportunity. My law firm is at 30 Wall Street, 12th floor. We're overlooking the stock exchange here. And the name of the firm is Kranjac, which is my name, Kranjac, Tripodi and Partners. And I'll give you my phone number. It's 201-615-6106. And you can find me online and email as well. So it's mkranjac@ktpllp.com. And the venture fund is Dynamic Capital. We're also here at 30 Wall. So yeah, I really appreciate that. And it was great chatting with you. It's a great way to start the week.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Well, and at the time of recording this, we're about to head into Holy Week, and so some of the highest, most consummate liturgies of the year are about to happen. So we're both looking forward to that, I know. And I appreciate that you were with us today. I think, Mario, that you've shown that it's possible to live an exemplary Catholic life in a number of different pursuits, in business, in investing, in the law firm, your profession, and certainly giving back to your local community. And as you said, rightly so at the very beginning, it's all about your children and raising your family and getting them to heaven. That's the key thing. And these other things that we do are all tools and steps along the way. So thanks for being with us today, and we appreciate it. And someday we'll have you back and we'll talk a little bit further about this. Thanks, Mario.
Thanks very much, Henry. Have a great journey through Holy Week and a blessed Easter.
God bless. It's the Catholic CEO, Henry Katarna. Thanks for being with us today. Stay tuned for more exemplary Catholic leaders.